Greetings one and all, and welcome to another faction ranking video. It's been a while since I did one of these. The last one I think was Galactic Republic, and I have a couple major factions left to get to, starting with Droids. Droids are a really fun faction. They're spread out a lot throughout the game as far as different teams. They play kind of support roles to a variety of teams like Rebels, Resistance, Galactic Republic, Scoundrels. They're all over, and there's a couple dedicated droid teams. But they are just very spread out, so it's a very fun, impactful faction, and was the subject of 2 straight Datacron sets in a row, which kind of upped their viability for a little bit, which was a fun time. But anyway, we're going to get into them in alphabetical order, and this ranking is within the faction itself. So if it's S tier within this faction, doesn't mean it's S tier compared to like a Journey Guide ranking, or maybe even another faction. It's just within the capabilities of the faction, where does everyone rank? And since we're going alphabetically, we will start actually numerically with 000. And I put him towards the top of the B tier. He's this kind of a sideshow on the Afra team compared to his teammate BT1. He has C-3PO-like qualities, but he's not as flexible as C-3PO because he's one of the only characters in the game that can give out translation. The first being C-3PO and the other being Tech. And he calls BT1 to assist, inflicts torture, which is nice. It's a good debuff. His Omicrons are a joke. They're for just 3v3 Grand Arena, and it's all about if you kill an ally, or if you defeat an enemy, then something good happens. Which is like in 3v3, then you're at a 3-on-2. So it's kind of ridiculous. But mainly he is just a supporting role member to BT1. So that's why he doesn't get much higher than B tier. And next up we have 50RT, or Sortie as we call her, and she is top of A tier for me. Borderline S tier, but I did decide to just bump her down to A tier. I still get use out of her. She's kind of flexible now. People sometimes try to get tricky with a Rey lineup and put someone that's going to be a clever VIP with her. VIP is a very flexible, useful mechanic where you take the weakest ally. They're going to be under stealth all the time. They're going to recover health or protection. And a lot of good stuff. So that's pretty nice. But her main role, in my eyes, is just being a droid leader. And she takes a lot of leftover droids and gives them a home. They can't be separatist droids because separatist droids are already with General Grievous and they work very well. But on her team, she gives out spare parts, which is a great buff. 30% critical chance, 30% offense. And it's an unpreventable revive. So if they even get annihilated, they're going to come back and gain foresight protection up, so a lot of good stuff. Her AoE is a great starter move, which damages all enemies, inflicts multiple instances of damage, and can remove turn meter up to 30%. So if she gets to go first, you're going to guarantee some initiative over the rest of the team. So she is still just very strong, coming in at top of A tier. Next up, we have B1 Battle Droid, and B1 Battle Droid is top of B tier. It's a great droid, super important on that General Grievous team, although sometimes it does get dropped in 3v3, but in 3v3 it has a very interesting use under Newt Gunray to take out Qui-Gon Jinn teams, which this season is actually pretty important because they are juiced up. B1 is very unique in that they have a special that is never off cooldown, kind of like Rey, but Rey has more contingencies to use the specials. So you're going to do that AoE all the time. You can heal up your teammates, do good damage. B1's constantly assisting, which is very useful. It's also giving 2% offense and to itself for each stack of B1 it has, which you start at 100, so you start out at plus 200% offense. So it's crazy. And then all Separatist allies gain 0.5% tenacity and crit avoidance for each stack. So very impactful there, great on the team. It's great at hitting those target locks to keep the Terminator train going with General Grievous. But it's more so limited to that team, so it is just B tier for now. Next up, we have B2, just the partner to B1. And I gave him the nod for A tier because he has a little bit more flexibility and viability outside of just a General Grievous team. Because of how his kit works, he has a chance to get 100% turn meter whenever an ally is damaged. It's not limited to separatist droids, so it's very useful, and he is actually pretty nice on an Afra team and gives Afra one of its only chances to beat a Jabba team by inflicting buff immunity on the whole team. So it can also, and it also has a chance to reset its cooldowns when it gets hit. So it's constantly taking turns, resetting cooldowns. It can inflict target lock. So it works great on that General Grievous team or on an Afro team. And next we got BB-8, who is the background of this tier list. And he comes in at middle B tier. I think the most useful thing about him is his bonus turn meter at the beginning of the match. For droids, so if he's with a full droid team, you get 40% turn meter, which is crazy nice. It almost guarantees going first. People throw him with General Grievous. It helps prevent a bad batch counter. I personally like to put him with Sortie a lot of the time and get things going. Back in the day, he was mainly just with Jedi Training Rey, which was very useful because whenever he attacks out of a turn, he calls a random resistance ally to assist. If you have a full droid team, you pretty much need R2-D2 in there to assist because there's not many resistance droids. And then Illuminated Destiny is a nice ace in the hole. If things are going wrong, you cleanse the whole team, give tons of turn meter, tons of buffs, which is really strong. It's just hard to get to that point. And another weakness of his, he doesn't really deal much damage. And the fact that he taunts is kind of a liability. If it's an all droid team, he taunts when he does his middle ability. And he gets foresight a lot, but he's not durable enough to act as the tank. So it's kind of like, I wish it didn't do that sometimes. But mid B tier for BB-8. Moving on, we have our first S tier droid, and that is BT-1. BT-1 is S tier for mainly just the reason that he does tons of damage. His kit isn't particularly convoluted. It's just all about dealing damage. He is unique. At the start of the battle, BT-1 gains 100% offense. That's just crazy. When he defeats an enemy, he gets to take another turn. So he has basically 3 AoEs, which is ridiculous. He does the fire one, which does tons of damage, inflicts damage over time, and can inflict burning and expose. And then if you have 000 on the team, which you pretty much always will, you get another AoE called Kill Them All. It just damages all enemies, calls 000 to assist. And he gains turn meter a lot. I think it's from 000. So he's just kind of an assist. That's what I mean. 000 is kind of an assistant to BT-1. And then when you kill someone, you get to take a bonus turn, do haywire, and damage everyone, including your own team. So he is just a wrecking ball, one-man show. His basic hits 3 times. He is just crazy. So I'm having a lot of fun with him on the Afro team. Not too much else to say about him. He just burns people to the ground. Next up, we have another S tier droid, and that is C3PO. Put him right under BT-1, which I don't know if that's correct or not. I think that's definitely up for debate. And it's hard to talk about what C3PO does because he does so much. He has one of the most convoluted kits in the whole game. Even more convoluted than Galactic Legends in some ways, but maybe not quite there. His main thing is translation and confusion. So he confuses enemies and he translates for his allies, and both are great. Confuse acts as buff immunity with 1 stack, acts pretty much as a daze with 2 stacks. Except for Galactic Legends, it's just reduced counter chance. And then when they have 3 stacks, he's actually increasing their cooldowns constantly unless it's a Galactic Legend, which is very powerful. And then with translation, which 000 also has, but C3PO gives it out way easier, just getting extra max health, crit chance, and reducing your own cooldowns when he assists with the base, or when he uses the basic. He also gives tons of stat bonuses to both the Galactic Republic, Rebel, and Resistance factions. He has 3 different uniques that are dedicated to each 3 of those factions, but also Ewoks. I don't know if he's actually going to get used with Ewoks now that Nisa is in the game, but his kit is all over the place. Very solid and pretty plug and play. Next up, we have an up-and-comer, and that is Chopper. And Chopper is not an up-and-comer out of any change to his kit. It's just because of Captain Rex. Captain Rex is revolutionizing the Phoenix team that is going to be the hands-down best beginner team in the game. I kind of regret... Well, I don't regret. It's just unfortunate that by mid-year free-to-play farming guide, I decided to go away from Phoenix and try how that works, because then Rex came into the game and is going to be the clear-cut choice for that, for beginners. But he's mainly useful because of his basic. With Rex, the whole team's assisting all the time, and he has a 60% chance to reduce an ally's cooldowns by 1, which is really important to keep the train going with all the specials. And he also grants defense up, offense up, speed up, one of those at random to an ally. So that's constantly going to be going on, which is very useful. He has a Dispel. He gives protection up to the team when they get damaged. Which is just really useful, and he just has a little bit of a chance to assist whenever. If Phoenix or Droid ally uses an ability during their turn, so he might hit twice with all those mass assists. But Chopper, on his way up, mid B tier, great character now, one of the must-haves on that new Phoenix team. Next up, we have yet another S tier droid, getting them all out of the way early, and that is Dark Trooper. And similar to BT1, he is just a damage-dealing machine. Now, the order of these 3 is debatable. Just for me, Dark Trooper, I don't know. He really could go ahead of BT1. It's just hard to say. He's really fun for beginning players because you can get him really fast. He deals tons of damage really early. Best thing about him is his basic. Hits 4 times. Can't crit unless he has advantage, but that's plenty. He works kind of like BT1, but he has max 4 stacks, and it's 25% health and protection per. He's not just going down from getting tapped by 1 damage. But just the backbone of that standard Imperial Trooper team now, him and Piet, just when you get going, get those stacks of Emperor's Trap up, he starts doing ridiculous damage. Back in the day, or not that far back, but back when Set 4 Datacrons were active, he was able to take out Lord Vader teams, given the right circumstances, when not many others were. He can feed turn meter to the team, and he can recover his own stacks. But he is just a monster damage-dealing machine. Next up, we got Droidica, and Droidica is getting a generous bottom of A tier, and that is pretty much solely because of its Territory War Omicron. It is a staple. He is a staple Omicron for Territory War nowadays. He's one of the 2 Territory War Omicrons I actually have. The other's Juhani. But he kind of fell off a lot on the General Grievous team. He was the odd one out, got subbed out for BB-8, new Gunray, Watts, just anything other than Droidica, because his damage immunity is dispellable, so people can get around that easily. He can't crit on his assist, but it does. He can wipe some people out if you let him build up his stacks of charge. And then he unloads with his special and just wipes people out completely. But his Territory War Omicron is crazy. It turns his damage immunity into undispellable damage immunity at the beginning of the match. And if he dies when marked, he brings back the whole team, which is really annoying to deal with and really hard to plan around. But he is definitely increasing in his viability because of that Territory War Omicron. Outside of Territory War, not as useful. Moving on, we have the Kingpin Droid, General Grievous. And he has to be the top of the faction. He just has to be. He's the leader of the most potent all-around droid team. General Grievous' team is still better than a sortie team, in my opinion. He can sometimes counter Galactic Legends. I think Sith Eternal Emperor and JML are on the table in certain circumstances, though it is difficult. He's the fleet commander of the Malevolence fleet, which is a great ship, still reliable and viable even to this day. But he has a unique kit, and that is all his damage is all based around his health, and he can increase his health with his special. Just does a lot of damage, and he's the leader of that team. He gets a great turn meter train going. Kills his own allies or damages them over time, which is very unique, and gets bonus turns when they die. So it's all about him. He doesn't care about his droid allies. It's just about juicing him up, increasing his stats, and taking extra turns when they die, and he tries to help speed that along. Not too much to say about him. I mean, AoE is great, unavoidable. Target locks target lock enemies can't counter. It took a couple reworks to get him there, and on LT 101 threatening to delete his YouTube account, but we got there with General Grievous, and he is an amazing character this day. Next up, we have HK-47, and he's fallen off a little bit, and that's because of Malgus. So he is mid-C tier right now for me, just because you can't really use him. Early game, you can use him just well with Darth Revan, because it's going to take a while to get Malgus. He's actually really strong with the Darth Revan team. He does lots of damage, But he's really limited to Darth Revan because of his loyalty to the Maker ability. That's where he gets all the extra damage from. And his second special that does tons of damage, Assassin Protocol. It does most damage when he's with Darth Revan, if they have to be Death Marked or Feared to do more damage. And it like, you don't get off cooldown unless you're inflicting a lot of fear. So it's hard to do that. The best thing about him right now is his AoE Tenacity down. But since he is not actually a Sith, he doesn't fit on that Malgus team well. So don't set him with the team. So sadly, mid C tier for HK. When I started the game this time around 2019, he was a monster. So it's kind of sad to see. However, he is... Well, actually, I thought it was coming to someone else next. IG-100 is next. I was thinking we had IG-86 next. But IG-100 is mid-C tier too. Maybe he could deserve B tier because he is a great tank on the General Grievous team. But he's mostly limited to that team. He puts stealth on the whole team and basically acts as a pre-taunt in that way. Or he has a chance to gain taunt whenever he uses an ability. So if it's a basic, because he does counter too, he has a chance to get a near perma-taunt when he does his attacks. But he gives stealth to the whole team if he's on a General Grievous team, which makes him basically a pre-taunt. You can't get to anyone else, which is very useful. He has a cleanse. He's got a single target dispel, which is okay. But it's all not too impressive. That's why he's just C tier for me. Next up, we got IG-11. So we're in a lot of IGs right now. And he is low B tier for me. I don't get that much use out of him, and I honestly delayed gearing him up for a long time. The best thing about him, in my opinion, is the constant cleanse. He cleanses his team every turn. He dispels all debuffs from Droid and Scoundrel allies. And so he's useful on a sortie team, and also the BAM team, which BAM team with IG-11 and Quill, I don't know, not super important anymore in my opinion. But he acts like a tank, even though he's a healer, which is kind of unique. And he's not getting, I think he's not getting crit. He has something going on with Quill where he's recovering 40%. He recovers max protection equal to 20% of his max health, but if Quill's an ally, he gains 40%. That's it. So if you load him up with protection or max health, he's going to be recovering constantly, and he works as a solid tank. And next up, we got IG-86. Not too much to say about him. Not a good character. Day one character, no reworks, calls and assist. And his unique is kind of funny. He gains 4.5% crit chance for each living droid ally, and he has plus 20% critical damage. So watch out. Next up, we got the last IG droid, IG-88. I put him at bottom of B tier. And he mainly gets boosted up just because of his ship. IG-2000 is a pretty decent ship on that executor fleet. It's either in the starting lineup with the triple attacker and is a great threat. But I am waiting just land matches, like character battles, more than ships here. So he is low B tier because he doesn't have much use. He's a bounty hunter, but he doesn't really make many bounty hunter teams. And he's a droid, but doesn't always make the droid teams either. Best thing about him is AoE ability block, but it's only 55% chance. You can also do defense down on that, and then target lock if he crits. So he is semi-useful sometimes in a General Grievous team to get out the target lock, but overall not too impressive stat-wise, pretty flimsy. He can apply healing immunity on his basic, but he doesn't get used too much. He doesn't really have a home. Next up, another character that doesn't really have a home, we got Imperial Probe Droid. So Imperial Probe Droid used to have a lot more viability before the Great Nerf of 2022, where Darth Vader got nerfed into almost oblivion, because he was part of that counter to Rey, because he'd put target lock on enemies, and then they can't gain buffs. So it acted like a buff immunity. It was very helpful for that. I forget exactly how it worked. But right now, the only real use I can think of for the Probe Droid is on an Afra team, kind of like B2, just to dispel buffs and prevent enemies from getting buffs. But that's about it. His self-destruct ability does 99,999 damage, which used to be like an insta-kill, but now it's kind of a tickle sometimes. So it is not that impactful. He is not that good, so that's why he's bottom of C tier for me. However, at top of C tier, we got K2SO, and he's top of C tier instead of low B tier, just because I don't think you really need him for the Rogue One team. I get along just fine without him. He's like year 10 or something for me. But he is the best tank for that team. He's better than Scarecrow Pathfinder, in my opinion, just because he counters. He has 97.6% counter chance, so nearly 100%. And it's great because you can he pops those exposes from that build up on the Radis team. And I have lost many a character just because he counterattacked, killed them, and they had tons of exposes. Like in a Bounty Hunter team, he killed Fennec, he killed 3PO and Chewie when I used CLS one time. That's his main benefit. And he just taunts a lot. He has a 75% chance to gain taunt whenever he uses an ability on his turn. But it's dispelled whenever he takes damage. It's kind of interesting. His Zeta is really funny. It's like gains 1% max protection whenever he gains damage. 1%. So if he gets hit 100 times, he'll double his protection. But gonna take a little while to get there. So not super impressed with K2, but he is decent-ish. Could make an argument for B tier. A tier is L337. She is a very durable, versatile droid taunting tank, pre-taunting tank. Not just great with droids, great with any kind of light side. So she's one of the rare light side pre-taunting tanks, and it's almost a perma tank. She has counter chance, gains a lot of critical avoidance and defense when she gets prepared and gets her Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 up. But yeah, she's just a really durable tank. You know, there's not too much to her kit other than that. She's pretty simple, doesn't deal too much damage, but the fact that she's a pre-taunt and keeps taunting so often makes her super valuable in my opinion. And we're coming down the home stretch with 3 more droids, but good ones. And next up we got R2-D2 that I am putting in mid-A tier. So he's fallen off a bit in viability. He used to be one of the most plug-and-play characters in the game, just because of how he worked. But now, it's harder to find uses for him. A lot of times I just stick him with Sortie on defense and call it a day. But he's very useful in a JMK mirror to avoid losing one character, because you put everyone under stealth except Jedi Master Kenobi. And that stealth move is one of the most useful things about him nowadays, I think. It's useful in Galactic Challenges, where you need a bunch of stealth. It's also really important to just protect your team. In Conquest, you can put it on like Rey or something, who can't normally taunt. I guess you could have Voluntary Vanguard. But it's just a really useful ability. Stun on the basic is always great. AoE burning is nice. He shares stats with his allies, and whenever lights it out, score a critical hit, they dispel buffs on themselves. So it's a passive cleanse on the team if you have the Zeta. Shares stats with Droid, Galactic Republic, Rebel, or Resistance allies, giving out his max protection, health, potency. So it's very useful, and it's not crazy stat sharing anymore because it's only 10%, but still very useful. Next up we got T3M4, another one of those numbered droids, following the pattern of R2-D2, but different. And he's not super great. The best thing about him is he gives tons of extra damage to droid allies, 8% critical chance whenever he uses an ability, and then 8% critical damage for each debuff on an enemy team. So if you have a debuff heavy droid team, that can ramp up very fast. And he's part of that Grievous nuke team from back in the day, where you just use IG-88 lead and get a bunch of debuffs out there, and General Grievous does tons of damage. He also has high defense penetration, and he shares it with his allies, which also increases the damage further. The other most useful thing about him, he has an AoE buff dispel, so which is really handy. I sometimes use Sortie on offense, and that is the only way I get around some teams sometimes. He also has a cleanse for a target ally, and he does have a ship. You know, it's not a like landmark ship. It's just kind of a useful ship to have, the Ebon Hawk. But anyway, lower B tier for T3M4. And our last droid is 3PO and Chewie, who lands right in the S tier. Not super high up the S tier, and I don't know if you could argue we could be higher, but I bumped him up into S tier over Sortie, because, I don't know, I just think he's kind of stronger. AoE Dispel is very nice. Inflicting blind on all enemies is super nice, and that blind prevents attacks out of turn. So it's almost like a Daze 2 with 3PO and Chewie on the team. Tons of damage through assisting constantly. His second special, where he does additional damage up to 5 times for each dead enemy, and AoE. Does ridiculous damage. So he is very strong, and he also shares stats with all his allies if the leader is a rebel. So it limits him. He can't be just thrown on a droid team and share crazy stats, but he gains 40% of the leader's max health, protection, offense, defense, potency, tenacity, everything you can think of, and shares it half of that with all the rest of the rebel allies, and gives rebel allies plus 15% crit avoidance. So he's a fantastic character, definitely merits S tier for me, and I'm glad to hear that Galactic Legend Leia is supposed to keep the normal CLS team intact, and I hope that stays true. That's all for this one. I hope you enjoyed hearing me ramble about droids for 20 minutes or so. Don't forget to like and sub if you did enjoy. Got another ranking coming to you, hopefully not too far from now, but I hope these are fun for everyone, and this is a great faction. I enjoy doing it. Thanks so much, guys. See you later.